So then we come over here, you can see my wood pile that's been very carefully covered in brown tarp. Little area here that I'm working on. Back in that area there where the wood pile is, that's my garden workshop. I have a table, potting table. I didn't clean it up for you. You can see my wheelbarrow. And then in this area here, I've got some real heavy duty shade tolerant plants. Things like hosta, that big one right there, that's a big giant blue hosta. And you'll notice that a lot of the hostas that I'm growing are in containers. Well, the reason I'm doing that is because they're highly susceptible to a rodent that crawls underneath the ground called a vole, that's V-O-L-E, that eat the roots of plants. And of course, guess what kind of plants they like the roots most? Hosta. And so the way I combat it is I've got these plants in containers and they can't get to the roots. And that's kind of a cool thing. So then you look at the patio, I've got my gas grill, another table. We have the chairs set up for when our family comes to visit during the stay-at-home regulation. And so let's say my daughter, her husband, and their 3 kids come over. We have them all sit, in a semicircle here. And then my wife and I, we sit over here and we talk. So we maintain social distancing. We don't get close. Oh, it's hard as heck because I haven't hugged my grandkids for 3 weeks now. It's driving me crazy, and it's really hard when they come over and they do that and come over and visit because you want to hug them, but we've kept our distance. Here's a bonsai in a very shallow container. Probably hard for you to see, so we'll move back here. Y'all, I ask you to bear with me on this garden tour because this is the first time I've ever done it video-wise, and it's a little bit different than doing one live when people can ask questions and I can see whether they're bored or not, and I move on to other things. Sorry if I drone on about certain things, but hopefully some things will resonate with you. Here's another bed that gets late afternoon sun, and I've got a few empty spots. I'm incorporating some plants that I just bought on mail order that are going to be delivered. Then this is looking back. But if we come back over here, you can see the retaining wall, the ferns and hosta there, and you can get a feel for what it looks like in that direction. So the patio is an area where I put a lot of plants that I can't decide where I'm going to plant them. They're there. Oh, guys, this sedum right here, this kind of a yellow plant right there, that sedum is likes the sun, but look at the way that it's growing down on the rock like that. So it adds texture to the rock. And then, remember I told you about how cool it is to maybe plant some plants that are in front of the wall that grow up. So there's a black-eyed Susan. These are some volunteer ferns that have shown up, and they're growing out of the seams in the wall. So that's kind of a cool thing there. Let's come over here. I'll show. Oh, there's another. This was last year's driftwood, picked up on an island near North Topsail Beach, and it looks like it's been bleached out white with Clorox bleach, but just pretty. I put them in the garden. If they don't look good, we move them. That's the cool thing. If you don't try, how do you know? So I'm not worried about whether or not this is exactly the right spot for that or not. On the right there is a dwarf Hinoki false cypress. If you've listened to the podcast that I talked about, Logan Garden Shop podcast on gardening in place, that Hinoki false cypress is the one that if you brush up against it, it has that volatile chemical goes into the air that lowers your blood pressure, increases heart health, that kind of thing. So we're in the kind of the noisiest spot because of the roofers over there. So that saw is still going on. But so here's the patio. There's the table. All right, my gas grills. This is the outdoor living area. It's also what I'm considering the outdoor work area because of the mess over there where I'm potting up plants. So I'll only show you some of it. I'm a little embarrassed to show you. But I wanted to show you this bin. I bought this bin at Target. And I think you remember when we talked about the plant propagation that the bin worked really well. Let me show you what's in there right now. I'm gonna go ahead and open it. There we go. I've got some Elysium, anise, and some hydrangeas in there. High relative humidity. They've probably been in there for a couple weeks. They'll probably stay another week or two before I check them for roots. But an easy propagation situation here. This bin is on the north side of the house, so the sun doesn't shine in at all, and that keeps those plants from cooking. All right, I'll show you some of you remember the hydrangeas that I took, cuttings I took, the winter cuttings and the softwood cuttings. They're over here in the little holding area. There you go. You can see the hose is out. Yeah, when you're a lazy gardener, the hose stays out. But yeah, here they all are. These are the young plants that are being held in a shady location. I'm trying to get them to grow some better roots. These are the ones that were propagated in December. Now the ones I propagated last year, I've actually started to give away, and they're over here in the area where they get a little bit more sun. And I think you can see that there's some more foliage on them. They're growing quite nicely. So that's, for me, it's not just the garden, the landscape itself and the garden, it's also the process of propagating more, giving them away. I just gave a bunch to my neighbors, gave my daughter and son-in-law a bunch that they're going to be putting in their yard as well. So anyway, there's some few pine straw bales that have left to be spread. I like to beef up the paths. I use pine straw in my paths because of the pretty brown color, and I also use pine straw because of the softness that you get. And I do it twice a year. I do in the paths. I put it down in the spring, and then I put it down late in the summer, and that gives me a real good mulch to use for the paths. I don't like gravel, don't like to use hard paver. I've got too many paths for that, and the color-wise, it works very well. So that's the property proper. All right. Let me just give you some framework here. Right over here is what's left of an old chain link fence. And the corner of that, at the end of that fence, that post, marks my property line. And so if you draw a line from there all the way, let me get out here so you can see, all the way to this oak tree that's right there, okay? That's property line runs right there. And so as I come around here and I show you this path, you'll notice that the path runs into a garden area where there are more paths and more plants planted. And so here's the story behind there, and I'll try to be brief with it because I don't want us to be sitting here listening forever and a day. But back in 1996, when Hurricane Fran hit, we were I'll show you right where it was. That birdhouse marks the spot where I had an oak tree that was 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide. That's right, it was 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide. And that fell, and it fell across the property and leaned up against Dan's house. All right, it didn't hurt his house, but we had to cut that tree up. And I went from full sun to I went from full shade to full sun in one night. Can you imagine that? Cut the tree up and now I have sun. What's fascinating is all these trees that you're seeing back here are trees that were planted post 1996, all right? Even this big oak that you see off in the distance, okay? See this oak right here? Even this large oak, which is a white oak, showed up after 1996. In fact, it was a volunteer, and I'm convinced it's one of the children of the big oak that we lost. Anyway, in the park behind our house, it was a war zone. Trees had fallen, it was a forest back there, trees had fallen, and FEMA came out and they cut those trees, all the trees that had fallen on the ground, FEMA cut up into pieces that were about 2 feet long. And then they left, and I called the city of Raleigh and I said, guys, when's phase 2 of cleanup gonna happen? And they basically said, it ain't happening. What you see is what you get. So can you imagine looking out my sunroom, being in the backyard garden, looking out and seeing what looked like a war zone? Well, every Saturday I'd get up, go out into the park, grab these big logs, and I'd walk way as far back as I could. I'd walk and drop those logs, cleaned it out, cut some paths, and started planting plants. And after about 2 years, I called the superintendent of Parks and Rec and invited him out to show him what I had done in this area. I also told him I didn't want to claim the property as my own. I basically told him that I'd be willing to take care of it if he would provide me, the city would provide me with mulch. And since the tennis center, see it off in the background, since the tennis center is close by, hey, run me a hose bib so I can irrigate as well. Well, he hemmed and he hawed and he said, I don't know if we can do that. And I said, well, you know, listen, I've created a little bit less than 1/4 of an acre of a garden where people can walk through, and I'd be willing to take care of it free of charge if you just bring me mulch. And he said, well, I'm not sure about that. I don't necessarily feel comfortable about that because your neighbors may get the same idea. And I said, well, what would be wrong with that? People in the community taking care of neglected park property. He said, well, let me go talk to the city council and I'll get back with you on that. So I said to him, well, what can I do in the meantime? And he said, well, you can keep gardening out here if you'd like. He said, and then we'll just let you know. Well, that was 1998. I haven't heard from him. So I've continued to garden out here. So I've in essence taken care of my need for a bigger yard by being able to, you know, take care of the parkland. And so now I have this area that I work on and I plant plants. I bring my hose out here and I water and I take care of it. And so that cures me of the land envy that I often get from when I go to other friends' homes that have bigger pieces of property. But it's also a community service, and don't tell anybody. Well, it's not a secret. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And I don't have to pay tax on the land that I'm taking care of. So it's a win-win situation. I've spoken with the town before. We work together on projects out in the park. I'll go out and cut down dead trees for them, and it's just a really good relationship. This ground cover that you're looking at right here, by the way, is the Lenten rose. Remember we talked about the Lenten rose and how it tends to volunteer. Look at this large ground cover area that it's created pretty much on its own. I planted maybe 5 or 6 plants under here about 20 years ago, and you can see how it's just completely and totally covered that area. And I've done that in a number of other places as well. Remember I talked about the hellebores when we talked about division. Here's an interesting feature I put in my garden is I took rebar, took 2 pieces of 8-foot rebar, bent it in an arc, and then lashed it together at the top, creating this archway. Then I covered it with, you know, I lashed pieces of dead wood to it and then planted different vines on it. And you can see the honeysuckle vine seems to be enjoying it the most. And so this is kind of represents a transition area from one area in my garden to the other. Okay, so a couple more things I'm going to show you and talk to you about, and then we should be close to the end of the tour comprehensively. And then I'll try to edit it, put it together, and hopefully it won't be too bad. But I want to show you this tree, and I'm going to come back over here so you can see this white flowering tree that I planted out in the park about 25 years ago. There we go there. Let me hold that. There, you see that tree is called Chinese fringe tree, Chionanthus, C-H-I-O-N, Chionanthus retusus, and it's a vase-shaped tree that grows about 25 to 30 feet tall. And in April, it puts out these pure white flowers. Isn't that gorgeous? Pure white flowers, clusters all on the end of the stems, and it really sets apart. If somebody were to ask me today, what would I recommend for a small flowering tree for a small backyard, front yard, courtyard, something like that, Chionanthus retusus would get my vote. It's low maintenance, It doesn't require much pruning. It's pest resistant. You get this great white flowers, beautiful green foliage that looks almost evergreen, all right, but it's not, it's deciduous. And then it drops its leaves in the fall. And so this, and look at the bark. The bark is ridged. It has this unique and interesting ornamental bark. It's a fantastic tree. And where I've got it planted, you can see it from a number of different sight lines when I'm sitting on the patio and walking through the paths of the garden. So that's one unique plant I wanted to at least point out as we go through. So now walking through, a couple more. I'll take you on a little walk through the natural garden here out in the park. And the paths go up, and if I have enough in my budget, I'll bring pine straw back here all the way to the back. But number of different evergreens on either side, trying to incorporate more plants. In this area, you can see some young plants have been planted. There is the Chionanthus, and then underneath the Chionanthus, you can see the hellebores again, creating that carpet, which is kind of unique. A unique aspect, and it's so low maintenance. I don't have to worry about weeds. I don't have to worry about anything there all year long. And then in the early spring, I get all these great flowers. All right, two plants here in the natural area. One in the foreground is a large shrub. My gosh, it's up about 12 feet now, covered right now in these red flowers. And then off to the left is a small tree called Asculus pavia, red buckeye, that's in flower right now too. So we've got these two red to burgundy plants. Let's talk about this one here. Let me get close. I'll show you the flowers and tell you a real quick story about it. There they are. This is a hybrid that was developed at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. This is called Calycanthus ralstonii Hartledge wine, the Hartledge wine sweet shrub. Now there's a native shrub grows in the southeast called sweet shrub or sweet Betsy, Calycanthus floridus. And you remember I talked about sweet Betsy and showed you photos in a previous lecture when we were doing soils. Well, sweet Betsy, Dr. Ralston and his graduate student Richard Hartledge took sweet Betsy and crossed it with an Asian Calycanthus that had white flowers and were bigger. And then they made a selection, much like Dr. Werner did, that yielded, they made a selection that has these large burgundy flowers. Okay, now these don't have any kind of, apple cider smell to them, but they show up all over the plant and they're bigger. And so they create look at that, isn't that just stunning? And if you stick your nose in there, you stick your nose right in there, you may smell a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of sweetness, but who cares? I mean, just look at that flower with little white edges around the inside of the petals. It's just, and you can see they're just about, they're everywhere. And so this shrub grows in full sun to partial shade. The more sun, it's not going to grow as large and leggy. But this one, I've got two of them that are now up over 12 feet and just covered with those red flowers. It's really a neat plant to incorporate in the landscape. There you go there. And then next to it, as I was mentioning to you, next to it is a small tree. It grows about 30 feet tall, called red buckeye. And this plant flowers right now. And the hummingbirds that are migrating up right about this time of year come to this plant first. Look at those red flowers. They're spikes of red. This plant will grow in partial shade to full sun. It's a great medium-sized tree for the home landscape. Look at those flowers. Let's see if we can get to one yeah, there we go. There, that's that spike of flowers. And so you can see between the calyx and the corolla, this is a flower that a hummingbird would be very highly attracted to. High in nectar, really cool plant. And then check out the leaves. The leaves are what we call palmately compound. This is one leaf that I'm holding in my hand with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaflets. And so I've got this planted in this natural area, this woodland area. The three trees that you see are white oaks that are providing a significant amount of shade. So we'll take a quick walk through the rest of the park part of the garden, and then we'll be finished up with this tour. So here on the right, again, more hellebores bordering the path. All right, not only that, hellebores are also mixed with the variegated Solomon seal. All right, and so there's some more Solomon seal, and the two work really well. I had one small clump of Solomon seal, and look how much growth I've got. And then this is the last area of the garden that I'm working on. I'm trying to create a woodland garden here. So I cleaned out all the weeds and the brush. You see the clumps are all clumps of variegated Solomon seal. I've got some ferns in here. I've got a number of different woodland plants. I've ordered a bunch of plants that I'm going to incorporate here as well. And then the one plant that I wanted to show you was the one we talked about in seed propagation, Daphne-phyllum macropodium, the redneck rhododendron. Here it is out here as it's beginning to sprout. You can see how lovely the habit is. Let's get a little bit closer. I'll show you the new growth on this plant. Oh wow, this year we got flowers too. Look at that. Let's see, I gotta get it so you can see the flowers. There we go. Those are flower buds right there, okay? And then there's the new growth coming out, also with the red petioles. Oh, I'm excited. This is the first time that this plant has gotten flowers, and this plant is, remember, I think I mentioned it in class. This plant is dioecious, and so I don't know whether I'll get this as male or female. I've planted some other ones, other Daphne-phyllum that I grew from seed. So hopefully we'll get male and females so we can get some fruit and grow some more from seed. But look, just a really pretty, I love the color of the green of the new growth coming out. We got these oak there. Color of the green of the new growth coming out with contrasting with those petioles. It's great. Daphne-phyllum macropodium. And so I've planted a few of those that I grew. Whoops, there's my shadow. Oh, I just broke a rule for video. But this is a little area under those trees. I've got bottlebrush buckeye, Japanese maple. You guys are probably bored to tears by now. Anyway, the path comes out to the Millbrook Exchange Park main path, and then we'll come around this side, right by the tennis courts. And as we come down here, we'll see this is an area where water tends to collect from a heavy rain. You can see the riprap there, that water comes off the tennis courts. And so you see the berm that we created here. The city and I worked on this together. And so in this area here is where all the water collects when we have a heavy rain. But the good news is it perks, it drains. And it drains quickly. In 6 hours, after a 2-inch thunderstorm, in 6 hours, this area will be completely devoid of water. So there's a kind of a rock shale bottom on this. So this berm kind of collects that water and keeps it from washing out, washing out my landscape. But this is the kind of the view that people who are walking through the park see. I put together this mound with these rocks, and I've incorporated some more plants there. But this is a perfect example of how, if you pay attention to the community around you, you can contribute as a gardener to the well-being of that community. And so my neighbors and we work with the city on different projects in and around the park to help improve what's going on there. And we can avoid bad erosion problems, soil problems, by all working together. And of course, that's the path that goes up, tennis courts back there. So we'll take our walk, finish our tour, we'll take our walk, we've got some wind blowing here, take our walk back down the other path back into my backyard proper. Ah yes, nothing like the drone of of the chainsaw. Oh, I think maybe it'd be fitting and proper the last thing to show you as I walk into my garden are some of the leaves that are emerging from Ruby Falls. Take a look. You see that beautiful burgundy color. These leaves are about half emerged, cover in pollen as well. I'm excited as the leaves begin to come out on Ruby Falls and give us that burgundy color contrast with some of the Japanese maples. So that's about the size of it. I've realized we've been going on now for a good hour, but remember to put together a paper talking about some of the things you learned and some of the things you saw, and you know, some of those things that resonated with you relative to the tour. I apologize that we couldn't do it live. I suspect it might have been a little bit more dynamic than this one. Hopefully this wasn't too boring. Once again, guys, if you have any questions about anything I talked about, if you want the correct spelling for some of the plant names, I may try to put them on the video. But if not, just shoot me an email, send me a text. I'll be happy to share that with you. Thank you for your attention. If you use this for your assignment, have fun writing the paper, and we'll talk to you soon in the next lecture.